Madam Speaker, my esteemed colleagues in the chamber, the House Secretariat, guests of the House of Representatives, and the Filipino people, good day to you all. When I was entrusted stewardship of the Committee on Public Information, I knew beforehand that freedom of information would be at the forefront of our legislative priorities. I note the extensive history of the FOI bill and how it had been in the policy back burner for 3 decades. The odds truly were stacked against the committee to pass this measure. Throughout those years, there were multiple opportunities to pass this essential legislation. Enumerating each one would only remind us of regret. Had we passed it earlier, could we have prevented the corruption that plagued past and present administrations? Could we have built a more efficient, more responsive bureaucracy? Could we have unlocked our full potential as an economic powerhouse in the region and contribute to our ascent as a middle power in the global stage? Alas, we can only speculate. Muntikan na, almost. This is how I would describe the legislative history of the FOI bill. From the 8th Congress to the previous Congress, it has always been muntikan na. In the 20th Congress, however, things appear to be very different. There is renewed and sustained momentum to pass the FOI bill, as seen in its inclusion in the President's LEDAC priorities. In this August chamber, the committee made a subtle yet profound shift from freedom of information to the right to information, affirming that access to information is not a mere privilege granted by the government, but a constitutional right guaranteed to every Filipino. If there is one benefit, one silver lining we can derive from having the multiple times that the FOI bill, now the RTI Act, have been deferred, it is that we were able to build on rock-solid ground. The proposed RTI Act is anchored on a simple but fundamental principle. In a democracy, government information belongs to the people. This measure institutionalizes Section 28, Article 2, and Section 7, Article 3 of the 1987 Constitution, which guarantees that the right of the people to information on matters of public concern shall be recognized. After all, it is the right of every Filipino taxpayer to know how government transacts and spends its resources in all public sector tiers, from local government units to the alter egos of the President himself. This bill does not merely recognize a right, it makes that right real, enforceable, and accessible. It establishes clear guidelines for information requests, provides remedies against unjustified denials, and mandates proactive disclosure through accessible platforms and a centralized RTI portal. Importantly, the measure covers all branches of government, local government units, state universities and colleges, government-owned or controlled corporations, and even private entities that perform public functions or utilize public funds. At the same time, it carefully balances transparency with the protection of legitimate interests, including national security, privileged information, trade secrets, and the fundamental right to privacy. We incorporated the best and most innovative provisions of the many iterations of the FOI bill into the RTI measure, while adding its distinguishing feature, the creation of the RTI Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear colleagues, this representation and the Committee on Public Information are aware of the administration's push to optimize the bureaucracy in order to mitigate red tape and enhance government productivity. And so I preempt the question, Why create a commission at a time of government resizing or right-sizing? Because right-sizing does not automatically mean downsizing. A commission dedicated to transparency and accountability does not add to bureaucratic excess. It curbs it. By making government transactions open to public scrutiny, the RTI Commission becomes a powerful check against abuse by making pertinent details of government transactions transparent and accessible to the general public. Foremost among the reasons to have an RTI Commission is that this body will be in the vanguard of restoring the public's trust in our democratic institutions. In the past few months, government offices have suffered significant reputational damage due to the illicit acts of a select few. We need to rebuild our people's trust by promoting transparency while empowering them to hold their elected leaders accountable. The RTI Commission will ensure that the public is kept informed of government dealings, thereby empowering Filipinos to participate more meaningfully in nation building, scrutinize public spending, and demand accountability and integrity from their public officials. It also guarantees institutional independence and accountability in helping implement the RTI law. The Commission will practically be devoid of external influence in its decision-making, thereby sticking only to its mandate and the provisions of the proposed RTI Act. We note that the executive branch has an existing framework for the implementation of the freedom of information in all its concerned offices. This is operationalized by Executive Order Number 2, Series of 2016. The proposed RTI Act will not only supersede the aforementioned Executive Order, but also universalize RTI implementation across all branches and tiers of government, notably the local government units as well as the legislative and judicial branches. Given the scope and government-wide coverage of the proposed RTI measure, having a commission solely dedicated to upholding the right to information would ensure effective monitoring and enforcement. With quasi-judicial powers, the Commission can enforce disclosure obligations, ensure timely responses, and impose sanctions far stronger than those under existing executive policy. Apart from upholding the constitutional right to information, the RTI Commission will also lead nationwide campaigns to educate the public, including those in government, on their rights and responsibilities under the RTI framework. It will also be in charge of capacity-building efforts to equip civil servants with the end goal of fostering a culture of transparency and proactive disclosure within the bureaucracy. Ultimately, the RTI Act brings the Philippines closer to international standards on access to information. During our technical working group meetings, excellently chaired by Representative Brian Yamsuan, and in the drafting of the substitute RTI Act, we considered as input the best practices of other countries in the implementation of their respective RTI laws, not to copy them wholesale, but to adapt them to the Philippine context. The private sector likewise stands to gain significantly from the passage of the RTI Act, which serves as an essential economic policy infrastructure. In countries with established RTI systems, businesses rely on public data for investment, innovation, and planning. In contrast, the absence of an RTI law in the Philippines makes access to information inconsistent, slow, and costly, discouraging investment and effectively acting as a hidden tax on firms. These challenges are even more severe in rural, predominantly agricultural areas where information silos especially at the local level, limit access to vital data such as soil conditions, weather patterns, and production figures. This slows modernization and makes it harder for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, cooperatives, and startups to grow. Without standardized protocols, businesses also face duplicative and mismatched requirements across agencies, increasing costs. Taken together, these barriers highlight the urgent need for the RTI Act to drive efficiency and strengthen competitiveness. My dear colleagues, let me cite another practical reason why this measure needs to be passed now more than ever before. We are living through a geopolitical crisis that threatens our economic stability. The conflict in the Middle East has disrupted global fuel supply chains, and the effects are reaching our shores. We are a fuel import-reliant, service-based, consumption-driven economy buoyed by international remittances. In times like these, we need a government that is more efficient, more prudent, and more accountable in managing our finite resources. Having an RTI law will ensure that every public transaction, except those legitimately exempt, is open to public scrutiny. After all, taxes are the lifeblood of the nation. We have to make sure that taxpayers' money is well accounted for and that every move of government, from the local to the national level, should not be wasteful and impulsive, especially as fuel prices soar, inflation persists, and household incomes unfortunately remain stagnant. This measure, my dear colleagues, can serve as a powerful instrument for government to weather the geopolitical storm now confronting our nation. Economically speaking, we find ourselves in the very eye of that storm. By supporting this measure, we give our people another avenue for participatory governance, which in turn makes government less excessive, more transparent, and far more prudent in the conduct of public transactions and the spending of public funds. This measure is not only a buffer against economic uncertainty, but also a powerful anathema to corruption. We cannot undo the scandals of the past, which put our democratic institutions under siege, but we can prevent them from happening again. We cannot afford another crisis of that magnitude while the world around us grows more volatile. My dear colleagues, my friends in the hallowed halls of Congress, I urge you to support the Right to Information Act. It will be one of the institutional buffers that helps us weather the storms ahead. Before I end, let me thank our partners in civil society, in the private sector, and in government sa pagsisikap at sa hindi pagbitiw sa advokasiyang maipasa ang batas na ito. 35 years is a long time to wait for a measure so fundamental to democracy. Madam Speaker, ultimately, we answer to the Filipino people. They have been clamoring for transparency for far too long. The more transparent government is, the less room there is for corruption. And a more transparent government is a more effective government, one better able to serve its people and shield them from economic uncertainty through sound, responsible governance. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang sambayan ng Pilipino.